Thank you. so much. That's John Timmons and myself, Kevin. Thank you. You heard Sonny, great Sonny. We started with Miles Davis, All Blues. We then went to
Minor blues.
G minor blues. There's a lot of blues, but don't feel bluesy. I will play something happy for you. We have a major.
Major 7.
welcome everybody. I calculated, I think this is the 7th year we've done this. Welcome to the 7th annual Evening of Poetry, Art, and Jazz at Tunxis Community College. I have a thank you list because anything like this takes a lot of people to put together, and so that should only take about an hour. That was a joke. Okay. And I have a few announcements. First of all, in addition to hearing our esteemed poet Marilyn Nelson this evening, there is going to be a poetry slam afterwards. So if you have your own work, if you happen to do improv slamming, improv poetry, you're welcome to sign up in the back. There's several lists. If you're here for a class, you may want to make sure that your class list has your name on it. So that's first. Also in the back, we have Ms. Nelson's books for sale, 2 of her collections of poetry. And also for sale, we have tickets for the Tunxis Theater Group's Almost Maine. Dates on that? November 16th and 17th, 2 weeks from tomorrow, here in the Tunxis Theater, directed by Professor George Sebastian Coleman. This is a comedy by John Cariani. It's a series of events, vignettes, of couples falling in and out of love in a small town in northern Maine. So hope you guys won't miss that. We have a very vibrant theater club here, and we're proud of it. I'd like to thank a bunch of people. First, for promotion, publicity, signage, Brian Bonina, Melissa Lamar in public relations, Dave Archambault, and last but not least, Lorraine Lorraine Nahabadian, who also happens to be one of our security personnel here at the college. She made a great sign for us tonight. I'd also like to thank Mike Zish, who is here on videography, and John Crowley from Media Instructional Technology, who set all our media up. Brett Lewis from Facilities, who was absolutely fabulous in getting the room arranged. Dr. Catherine Addy, who is our president in the audience, and who is an enthusiastic supporter of anything we do in the humanities. And also the humanities chair, Carol Mahmood, who is here somewhere in the audience, who champions everything we do in our department, including events like this. Also thanking Kevin O'Neill and John Timmons for the fabulous music this evening. And 2 very important people who were the engines that made this happen. Rosalie Kavoris, who is the faculty assistant, who takes care of every detail and the paperwork that makes all this happen. And if you know we're a state college, you know that there's a lot of it. So she's a wizard. And last but certainly not least, the woman in the back who made all this food and these cool decorations. We love that she does this. And when she holds an event, she says the 5 words every person here at Tunxis wants to hear. Don't worry, just show up. Judy Miner. All right, so. And I'm Sally Terrell, by the way. I'm a professor of English here. Very happy to be here with you and to have the great pleasure of introducing Dr. Marilyn Nelson, who is our Connecticut Poetry Circuit poet this evening. Some of her books are for sale in the back. If you wish to purchase one of them after the reading, she will sign it for you. Marilyn Nelson is the author or translator. She translates from Dutch, by the way, right? Very amazing. Danish, beg your pardon. Translator of 15 books and 5 chapbooks, as well as several books of verse for children. Image Journal writes of her, American history as conceived by Marilyn Nelson is the inside-out, last shall be first version. She inhabits the voices of the overlooked and disenfranchised and shines light into the forgotten corners that reveal essential truths about the whole. But if she is a revisionist historian's poet, she is also a child's poet, a mother's poet, a housekeeper's poet, and a scientist's poet. It's this breadth of perspective from pole to pole, past to present, from spheres domestic to atmospheric, that make her so remarkable. Nelson is also an open-handed citizen of the nation of writers. Joyce Brown said of her, Nelson's writing is rich in story, philosophy, theology, and language. She moves comfortably from low to high diction and back again. Reading her work is as much a lesson in history and human nature as it is a lesson in poetry. Ms. Nelson's honors include a Guggenheim Fellowship, 2 Pushcart Prizes, 2 Creative Writing Fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, a Fulbright Teaching Fellowship, and the 1990 Connecticut Arts Award. From 2001 to 2006, she served as the Poet Laureate of Connecticut. This year, she was awarded the Frost Medal, the Poetry Society of America's most prestigious award for, quote, a distinguished lifetime achievement in poetry. Ms. Nelson is also a professor emerita of English at the University of Connecticut. It's my pleasure to give you Marilyn Nelson.
So there was this hurricane. I'm surprised so many of you are out. This must mean that there's an open mic. How many of you are going to read tonight? You have big families, or? I'm really so pleased that so many of you are out this evening. I guess I'll read for, 35 or 40 minutes. And I just have a new book. It's just come out. It's called Faster Than Light, New and Selected Poems. It has a picture of my friend's bare feet on the cover. I don't know, she's an artist and this is what she's doing. And I don't know why the publisher, well, it doesn't have anything to do with the poems. But she has great nail polish. I'm going to be reading from this book, but it's a new and selected, so it has poems from several earlier books. And so I'm going to read from the books that your bookseller has here. But I'm going to start by reading some new poems, and I will read first a poem it's based on two things. An article I saw 20 years ago in the Christian Science Monitor newspaper about a day when a jazz band played at the Franklin Park Zoo, which I think is the zoo in Boston, is that right? Franklin Park Zoo. Nobody knows? It's the museum in Boston. So there's this jazz band playing at the zoo. I read this article, and it reminded me of a poem I had read by the great German language poet Rilke, in which he talks about, his poem is about animals hearing music, instrumental music, for the first time. So put those two ideas together into this poem. It's called Live Jazz, Franklin Park Zoo. And it has an epigraph which I think is beautiful, a quote from the newspaper article. QB sobbed when a nearby jazz band stopped playing. Excuse me. I'm sorry, I don't usually take so long to get ready.
This is a good time to remind everyone to silence cell phones or put them away. Sorry, I didn't mention that.
I hope I silenced mine. Okay, Live Jazz, Franklin Park Zoo. A tree grew. Oh, remembering gorillas. Oh, Orpheus zinked. This is a quote from the German poem. It means Orpheus is singing. Oh, Orpheus zinked. Oh, Africa in the ear. The recluse Vip came out. Gigi sat still and wide-eyed, black face pressed against the bars. QB lay on his back as he usually does, vacantly staring. Then he turned over, hairy chin on one huge leather palm. With his other hand, he scratched his head, contemplatively picked his nose. The zebra's ears twirled. Behind their fancy fences, the silenced animals listened to something more. And where there had been, at most, a nest of boughs to receive it, music built a cathedral in their senses. I just love I love the fact that the QB, the gorillas, really responded to live music. First time they had ever heard music. And that QB, who was dying of boredom, sobbed when the musicians stopped playing. I'm living right now with my daughter's cat, who's not allowed to go outside. And I feel for him. He's at the window looking outside all the time. And if he could just appreciate music. A couple of years ago, I taught at the University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee, which was an interesting and very positive experience. And I was on my way to Sewanee from Nashville at the beginning of the semester, and this is a description of something that happened. The poem is called "To the Confederate Dead." On the way to Nashville, my cell phone rings on I-24. I take the next exit and return the missed call. Then see the sign, Beech Grove Confederate Cemetery. I turn in, pass a white house, drive up a hill, and stop. The stars and bars wave over white headstones. Beyond, a verdant pastoral. I park the rental, leave my purse and keys, and read the markers. Hoover's Gap. Here, the 17th Tennessee Infantry met the 18th Indiana Battery on June 24th, 1863. I do not count the headstones, the identical headstones. Unknown Confederate soldier. One after one after one. 3 rows. Spencer repeating rifles, 3-inch ordnance rifles, mountain howitzers, and this bucolic landscape. The 17th marched here in the rain that morning to a mounted infantry led by a man whose name rings a bell, Captain Eli Lilly. He made his own history. A framed statement of patriotic nostalgia displayed near the flagpole makes me wonder what it was about the Old South these nameless dead loved enough to die for. Was it really slavery? Did they despise my people enough to want to die, to keep us in chains? Even the boy who groaned here, remembering a molasses-skinned girl who was his in the cabins? The boy who knew he was hers as her name shaped his last breath? Even the boy who moaned, "Mammy," remembering dark mothering arms? Did he die so someone could sell her children? Left behind by history's tides like bodies tossed overboard, what did these unknown learn as the bullets shattered through them? Did they suddenly know our common humanity? Did arrogant ignorance bleed away? Engraved on granite, the farewell speech of General Nathan Bedford Forrest. Cultivate friendly feelings. My ancestor, Henry Ashburn Tyler, was one of Bedford's raiders. He fathered my great-grandfather and his sister and gave their mother a house. his legitimate children died without issue. His only descendants are us. A college president, teachers, professors, a pilot, accountants, business people, musicians, an actor, some writers, good people, people who feel blessed. Would he be proud of us? I am awakened from my musings by the crunch of tires on gravel. White men, 5 of them. They pass very, very, very slowly, staring. Then they turn around and squeal away. You were boys, I say aloud. You were boys. I get back in my car and drive on to Nashville. Since I've read this military poem, I'm going to read a couple more military poems because although many Americans don't want to admit it, our country is at war. We continue to send our young people to battle. This next poem is a poem I wrote for a friend of mine, a high school friend who was in the Marine Corps in Vietnam. About 5 years after he came back, he asked me if I would write some poems for him about his tours of duty. And this is called Written in Clouds. Now you're a buddy mucking 10 yards away with a rifle identical as an armed popcorn in the enemy's crosshairs. Then you're saying, hello, darkness. Now you see, now you don't. Is anyone ever ready? Do you get an explanation, an apology? Or does the water that was you, that was 70% of you, re-enter the cycle and shed your name? Evaporating, condensing, purifying, quenching, forming ice crystals and rainbows, the same water for billions of years recycled in the planet's breathing helix. Molecules of this shape-changing skyscape might once have been you, Morales. They must have been you, Woody, Armstrong, Moses, Doc, Peters, Capodanno. Good Marines, all of you. I want to read another military poem. Is that okay? I grew up in a military family, so this is really a part of my life. My dad was a career Air Force officer. This one, it was originally written for an anthology of poems protesting the reprehensible immigration laws passed by the state of Arizona. I did a little research and found that of all ethnic groups in the country, the group that has the highest enlistment rate, especially into the Marine Corps, is Chicano. And it's possible, therefore, for someone who's a child of so-called illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, to be a U.S. citizen and to serve in the U.S. military. And this poem is about that. The speaker of it is a member of an honor guard at a military funeral. Lost in blue stillness, I ride on a wave of cumulus daydreams. We stand at ease, whiling away our weight. Some birds call doves from the bordering trees. I check my watch. They're 20 minutes late. He must be loved. Distant traffic, a breeze tickles the leaves. Under the cloud scud, a rolling landscape of white markers in imperfectly spaced rows. I'm brought back from surfing the sky's sea face by crunching wheels and the call to attention. We perform as drilled, precisely synchronized, the ritual of warriors laying a comrade to rest. The hearse delivers the flag-draped coffin into the strict ballet of our white-gloved hands. The riflemen fire a perfectly timed salute. As the bugle plays the 24 notes of taps, I glance at the brown knot of the next of kin, probably parents, siblings, his pregnant wife. Private Joseph Gonzalez of Tucson was 19, a roadside explosive device. We fold his flag slowly into a triangle of stars, which the sergeant presents with the nation's gratitude. I'm sorry, I'm going to beg somebody for a cough drop. Does anybody? I'm sorry, I should have them. We fold his flag slowly into a triangle of stars, which the sergeant presents with the nation's gratitude to the stunned child bride widow. The older man stares into space. The older woman moans, Dios mío, Dios mío, Dios mío, ay, Dios mío. I'm sorry, I screwed that one up. I'm going to skip then to read some poems from the books that are here. Oh, I feel better already. Because for about the last 10 years or so, I have been writing histories. I've been writing small books that tell true stories from history. And in this volume, I call them lyric histories because all of these little books have been published for the young adult audience, which means they're marketed to middle school and high school kids. And I was doing a reading a couple of years ago at a junior high school, and during the question and answer period, one of the girls, I think a 7th grader, raised her hand and said, "Excuse me, but as a lyric historian, do you blah, blah?" And I said, wait a minute. Did you just make that term up, the lyric historian? Or did you read that someplace? And she said, no, it just came out. So I told her that I'm going to call myself a lyric historian from now on, and that the term comes from a 7th grader. So I've been writing these lyric histories, and it's been wonderful because it requires me to do research and to learn something in the course of writing. So I'm going to read from 2 of these lyric histories that are here. One of them, I started with 18th century. There are 2 books about the 18th century. There's there are 2 that are about the 19th century, and then there are 2 about the early 20th century. So I'm kind of covering all of the bases. And I'm going to start by reading some poems about an 18th century man who's buried in East Haddam, Connecticut, where I live. When I first moved there, everybody I met said, "Oh, well, welcome to town. Are you going to write about Venture Smith?" I had never heard of Venture Smith, but he's very well respected in this town. Venture Smith was born in the 1720s in what is now Guinea. His father was a prince. He was kidnapped as a child, put on a slave ship, bought by a member of the crew of the ship. So when he arrived in North America, he was already owned by somebody and renamed. The man who bought him said, "You're my first business venture, therefore I'm calling you Venture." And he served 30 years as a slave in Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New York. And then, after 30 years, he was allowed to purchase his freedom. And then he purchased his 4 children. And then, with the help of his children, he purchased his wife. And then he went into what I call the freedom business, freeing people, just buying people and freeing them. And he thought that if I buy you for $500, I put you to work for me, I hire you out to somebody else, you can keep 50% of what you earn, but you pay me 50%. And within, let's say, 5 years, you will have repaid my investment, and then you're completely free. He thought this was going to work. It never worked out as easily as he thought it would. But at the time of his death, in 1798, he was a major landowner in East Haddam. He owned lots of land, a lot of boats, all of which he bought by mostly chopping wood, selling firewood. And actually last week, I think it was last week, I read at Middlesex Community College, and I gave this little introduction to Venture Smith, and one of the young men in the audience said, "I'm one of the descendants." They're 8th and 9th generation descendants of Venture Smith meet every year at a congregational church in East Haddam. Every year they celebrate Venture Smith. And this is, I don't know, as African American families go, I don't think there are very many families who have that many generations of freedom to celebrate. So, okay, I've given you a long introduction. Let me just read some poems. These are based, he dictated his life story. It was one of the first books published in Connecticut, the Life of Venture Smith. You can find the whole thing on the internet. I'm sorry, I'm going on and I can't stop talking. If you've had a 19th century American literature course, you've probably read the slave narrative of Olaudah Equiano, also known as Gustavus Vasa. Are you familiar with it? Mm-hmm. There are only 2 narratives that go back this far. One of them is the Gustavus Vasa narrative, and the other one is the Venture Smith narrative. These are the only 2 first-hand descriptions we have of being captured in Africa, being put on a slave ship, being brought to the New World. So Venture Smith is very important in history. So I read maybe 3 poems in the voice of Venture Smith. Again, they're based on his own words. The first poems in my book are sonnets, but I wanted to do something to the form to indicate the wrenching nature of what was being described. So instead of having the rhymes only at the end of the lines, I put them at the end of the line, and then the rhyme at the end, the word at the end of the line rhymes with the word at or very near the beginning of the next line, so that they're kind of turned inside out. I can't describe it any better than that, but if you're interested, some of you are studying poetry, some of you are writing poetry, you are maybe interested in hearing this. So this poem is called Pestilence. 6,000 men strong, the army poured toward the sea. Slavery's wide wings gliding overhead spread an infecting shadow as step by step they swept like a battalion of ravenous ants, advancing through the landscape. I'm so sorry. You know what, it's partly nerves. Just being in front of an audience makes me nervous. Let me see. As step by step they swept like a battalion of ravenous ants, advancing through the landscape and leaving a stench drenched in sweat, shit, vomit, terror, and smoke. The gentle folk of every village burned, borne by the black tide, shuffled in the slaver's wake, awake for the first time to a larger fate, indeterminate but nasty, on the world stage in an age when a workforce could be bought and sold. Golden the flow of human life down the green slopes, hopes shriveled in the glare of the distant, bright, whitewashed castles' acrid glitter in sunlight. I'm going to try to do this reading. Maybe if I talk slowly and let the microphone do the rest of the work. A Voyage by Sea, 1738. 11 months on the charming Susanna, an ordinary passage. But smallpox amuck in the hold set 60 people free. The sea gulped them down in a boil of grins and fins, men and women tossed like offal to the sharks. Discharge, excretion, diarrhea, spew, oozing, pustular, nausea, vomit, snot. Brought from Africa, they were to be sold to the New World as fuel for the grinding machines of history. Festering, sticky, shit-smeared, mucus, pus, pissed on, menstruating, sweaty, stinking. Dazed and erased en route before they were renamed by whim. Who were those anonymous, generic slaves, graveless as garbage, splashed to the greedy waves?